I'm Raja Shehadeh of Palestine. I will read from Palestinian Walks, Forays into a Vanishing Landscape, of an encounter during one of my walks in the Palestinian hills with a Jewish settler from the settlement of Dolev, 10 miles north of Ramallah, where I live. Just as I reached the water, I realized that someone else was already there. I noticed him from the corner of my eye. I did not look directly at him. I did not want to allow him to disturb my peace. But I knew he was there and that he was an Israeli settler. It was then that I decided that I noticed a strong, unusual smell. I realized it was that of hashish mixed with another more potent substance that I could not identify. When I arrived, the settler was busy preparing his nargile, water pipe, on a flat rock right next to the stream. He was surprised by my unexpected entry into his private little enclave and stopped what he was doing. He could not immediately be certain who I was, perhaps an Israeli, a man of the law, someone who could arrest him for smoking the forbidden weed. But of course, he had the authority. He was the law. He also had a gun, and the settler can shoot at a Palestinian with impunity. I took a careful look at his face. It was narrow with a prominent nose and kind, intelligent eyes. He had long, straight brown hair that reached down to his shoulders, falling on both sides of his head like a scarf. He was clearly an Israeli settler, as I had assumed from the start. But I didn't want to judge him. I wanted to be on my way. Without uttering a word, I concentrated on choosing the best stepping stones to ford the brook. I almost got to the other side when I heard him call in Hebrew, "Your hat, you've dropped your hat." He had a soft, kind voice. Still, I was surprised to be accosted by the settler. I had somehow not expected it and was hoping to just slip by, unseen, unseeing, each to his own. But this was not to be, not anymore, not in the Palestinian hills in the spring of 2006. My hat was going downstream quickly. I crouched to get it, but couldn't. I saw it floating and bobbing over the rocks. The Israeli rushed after it. He was younger and more nimble than I. He caught it. He stood there holding it toward me. My gaze wandered from him to the rock where he had balanced his nargile and where his gun also rested. His eyes followed mine, and I saw him stiffen, evidently trying to decide between running to the gun and giving me my hat. I didn't move. I was curious which way he would go. Now, using English, I said, "Your gun is out of place leaning against that rock, don't you think?" He didn't speak. Perhaps he didn't understand my English. I rephrased what I said. "This beautiful day and the gun don't go together." After a brief silence, he spoke. He was almost apologetic, which is most untypical of an Israeli. He said, "I know, but I have to." Looking at the nargile, I asked, "Do you come here frequently?" I was wondering whether he often ran away from home to smoke his dope in private, whether our hills now served as refuge for young Israeli settlers indulging in illicit practices. "It's my favorite spot," he answered. Of course, I thought, a perfect hideout. "Aren't you afraid of being here alone?" "Afraid? Why should I be? I've done no evil to anyone." Done no evil, I thought. after all the land he and his people have stolen, after destroying our life for so long, why then carry a gun? I'm supposed to. How convenient for you to live so close to this valley. You just walk down the hill and you're here. I come here to be alone, the settler said pointedly. I caught the innuendo, but I was not going to go away and leave him now without trying to find out a few things about this unwelcome neighbor of mine. Were you born in Dolev? No, but my parents moved here when I was 5. What about you? Where do you live? Ramallah, I answered. I suspected you were an Arab, but was not sure. Arabs don't walk. How do you know that? Are you acquainted with many Arabs? No, not at all. Then how did you come upon that conclusion? Just from watching the village people nearby, I never see them taking walks or sitting by the water. Perhaps because they're afraid. Why should they be afraid? Because of you. Of me? Yes. Aren't you carrying a gun? I wish I wasn't. It's heavy and it's a burden. But as I said, I have to. I couldn't help saying, I suppose you do, in a heavily sarcastic voice, though I regretted doing so almost immediately. What do you mean? The settler snapped. To protect the land you've taken from us, I said in a matter-of-fact way, resigned to what was coming. We didn't take anyone's land. Dolev is built entirely on public land. Assuming it is, why should you be the only beneficiaries? Because it was promised to us. All of Eretz Israel is ours. And where do you propose we live? You have your place, we have ours. But you're constantly expanding and taking more land. There's hardly any left to build our state. Why do you need another state? You already have 21 Arab states. We've only got one. Can't you think for yourself? I blurted. Can you only repeat what you've been told? He looked at me with an expression of shock and defiance. He was not going to take this. Good, I thought. Perhaps now I will get some real emotions and honest thought. Did you know that this land you're on has been declared a nature reserve? We are protecting this spot. Except for us, it would have been ruined. As a walker, you should appreciate this. I couldn't believe it. I said, you're protecting our land? After all the damage your bulldozers have done, digging highways in these hills, pouring concrete to build settlements, you claim to be preserving this land? I have not been able to enjoy these hills since your people came. I walk in fear of being shot at or arrested. There was a time when this place was like a paradise, a cultivated garden with a house by every spring, a small, unobtrusive house built without concrete. And then the Jews came like the serpent and ruined everything in the idyllic garden. You blame us for everything, don't you? But it doesn't matter. We've learned our lesson from our long, tortured history. Here, in our own land, our existence is not premised on your acceptance. We've long since found out that we have to be strong if we are to survive here. There was little to say after this, but I made one last effort to alert him to what was being done to the land by those who claimed to love it. I said, the way it's going, we'll end up with a land that is crisscrossed with roads. I have a vision of all of us going around and around in circles. Whether we call it Israel or Palestine, this land will become one big concrete maze. He said nothing. He was still holding my wet hat. We were both standing up. "Would you let me have my hat?" I asked. "I want to continue with my walk." He stepped forward. I reached out and took the hat, turned my back, and began walking. I could feel the settler's presence with his gun behind me. Then I heard him calling after me to stop. It felt more like an order, which the law, his law, gave him the power to enforce. I feared for the worst. But when I turned around, I realized he was not threatening me. Instead, he gestured at his nargile. "Would you like to smoke with me?" he asked.